Hi, I'm Susie Garden, and this is the Ageless and Awesome podcast. I'm an age-defying naturopath and clinical nutritionist, and I'm here to bust myths around women's health and aging so that you can be ageless and awesome in your 40s, 50s, and beyond. The Ageless and Awesome podcast is dedicated to helping women through perimenopause and menopause with great health, a positive mindset, and outrageous confidence. Hit subscribe or follow now, and let's get started. Hello, gorgeous one, and welcome to this week's episode of the Ageless and Awesome podcast. This is the final for now in my weight loss series, and today I'm going to be focusing on something that is relatively common, I guess, well, certainly in the women that I see, and it's Polycystic Ovarian Syndrome, or PCOS, or PCOS, the little terms that it goes by. And you may have heard of this, you may have this, you may have it and not know you have it. There is a lot that goes on with this condition. And I wanted to talk about it because it is something that can kind of turn or be diagnosed. I was going to say turn up in, but it's not quite right. You've probably had it all your life, but sometimes the symptoms may present more a little bit like perimenopause. And that's when some women will go to their doctor and then find out actually there's something else going on and it's potentially PCOS. So let's start with what actually is PCOS. It is actually a hormonal condition, and it's kind of characterized by how it impacts women's menstrual cycles. So sometimes women actually have no cycle at all. I have had one client go through my program. She had no cycles at all for the majority of her life, I think until she had kids, and then she started having regular periods, which is kind of, that's an unusual presentation. Generally what women will notice is that they have kind of irregular cycles. Generally, it's less frequent. So they may only have a few cycles a year. And sometimes that gap in between cycles, sometimes women don't even notice it because they're not thinking about it, particularly because this is a condition that generally presents in younger women, and they're busy living their best lives. Sometimes they might be on a hormonal contraception, which will mask the symptoms of PCOS often, because the bleed that you have when you're on, say, for example, the oral contraceptive pill, when you're taking those sugar pills and we kind of think of it as you're having your period. It's actually not a period. It's just a pill bleed. So this can mask the fact that you're not actually having cycles. So PCOS can cause either no cycles at all, so no periods, infrequent cycles, so very occasionally having a period, or cycles that have no ovulation. So no egg is being produced. So we might be just menstruating normally and don't notice that there's any issue going on, but there may not actually be any ovulation happening. And often when we're looking at why is this happening in the testing that we're looking for, generally there's increased testosterone being produced. That's one of the hallmarks of this condition. So there's increased testosterone or other androgens, and some of the symptoms that, as well as these cycles that are a bit off, are acne, dark hair on the face, not really one that people really want to have, generally speaking, tummy weight, so really gathering weight around the abdomen, and insulin resistance. And as I mentioned before, it is more common in younger women. However, definitely women who are over 40 can suddenly present with this, and often it gets dismissed as peri. And it's only sometimes, and it's an interesting thing at the moment, GPs are not testing hormones for perimenopause like they used to, simply because, it's kind of an expected thing to happen to women in their 40s and 50s. So that it's not really thought that it's necessary to test hormones, because it's like, well, if you're having all of the signs and symptoms and you're the expected age, then, there's no need really to do the extra testing. And so sometimes these conditions can go overlooked or get overlooked because of that. But it's not a super common condition either. So it's not necessarily a bad thing that these are not getting tested. The bloods rather are not getting tested. So it's really, if you are noticing some of these other symptoms, that perhaps that will prompt some testing. Even though this condition is called Polycystic Ovarian Syndrome, when women are over 40, if they are getting tested for PCOS and they're having an ultrasound to look for multiple cysts on the ovaries, it's way less likely to be seen on women over 40, simply because we have fewer eggs at this age. So you may not actually see the cysts and may not be there actually. So the kind of tests that we do for PCOS are blood tests and breath tests. And so if you think, there's something not quite right, I don't think it's Peri, it could be something else, then go and have a chat to your healthcare practitioner. Your GP, your naturopath can do the testing if it's warranted. And if you want the testing and the GP is saying, no, it's not necessary, you can go to a naturopath and get that testing done. That's through private pathology. The thing is, the GPs often have their hands tied because the testing they do is often through Medicare. And they have certain kind of restrictions over how frequently they can do those tests for people. So if you really want lots of testing done, obviously you're going to have to pay for it, but you're going to be more likely to be able to get that through a naturopath. So it's just a thought to have if you're not happy with the answers that you're getting. It's not necessarily the GP's fault, they're just following guidelines. But yeah, if you're prepared to pay for the testing yourself, go and have a chat to a naturopath that is experienced in these things in women's health, and they can order the right tests. So I'm always very conscious of people's budgets when I'm ordering tests, and I will only order tests that are going to change a treatment plan or to help to find out what's going on in a person's body. So that is something you can absolutely do if you want to. But let's talk about why this happens. And I'm really just going to stick to the perimenopause kind of PCOS, because there's a number of different types or underlying causes of PCOS, and they're really more for the younger women. I really want to just talk about women in their 40s and 50s, obviously, because, that's the kind of listener that I have. So the main cause of PCOS is something called insulin resistance, which I have talked about over the years on the pod. So if you want to know more, go into the search function in this podcast, and if you put in insulin resistance, you should get a whole bunch come up. Or go on my website and have a look on the podcast page or the blog page. Actually, there'll be a number of blogs about insulin resistance as well. And essentially, when we have too much insulin, so insulin resistance happens when we get too much insulin in the blood, okay, essentially. That's a very simple explanation, but I don't really want to spend time going into a really detailed explanation when I've done so much on it already. So when you have too much insulin in your blood, this can impair ovulation, all right? And then when you get this impaired ovulation, the ovaries start to make testosterone instead of estrogen. Okay, that's step one. This increased insulin can also stimulate the production of something called luteinizing hormone, or LH. It's one of our normal reproductive hormones that helps to basically manages our menstrual cycle. And this stimulates more androgens. And also, too much insulin decreases something called sex hormone binding globulin. And that means we've got more free testosterone in our blood. And so all of this increased testosterone and androgens causes some of those symptoms that we associate with PCOS, those more kind of male characteristics that can appear. And unfortunately, one of the biggest causes of insulin resistance is essentially too much sugar. too much sugar. And I don't know if you're like me, I love sugar. I really do. But I know it does not love me. So I really try and restrict my sugar as much as I possibly can. Other things that can cause insulin resistance are smoking, hormonal contraception, if you have sleep issues. So if you're not sleeping well, not sleeping that 7 to 8 hours a night, that can be a cause of insulin resistance, because we have lots of stuff that goes on in our bodies when we're in deep sleep with regard to our blood glucose metabolism. Alcohol, of course, trans fats in our foods, unhealthy gut bacteria. And the thing is, unhealthy gut bacteria can be caused by smoking, hormonal contraception, poor sleep, alcohol, trans fats, etc. But it can also be caused by lots of antibiotic use, by food poisoning, especially if you were sick for, more than just a day or two. Many things can cause unhealthy gut bacteria and a not balanced microbiome. Also, if you're magnesium deficient, and about 1/3 to 1/2 of our population is magnesium deficient because our soils don't have as much magnesium as they used to, so it's not coming up the food chain. So that's a one as well, particularly with insulin and glucose metabolism. Also, environmental toxins. So that can be anything from handling FPOS receipts frequently, like if you work in retail, eating out of plastics, having a lot of takeaway food that's in those plastic containers, reheating in the microwave in those plastic kind of containers, particularly those disposable containers. And I used to do a lot of that in my 20s, my gosh. So, I've had all of us have had a lot of exposure over the years, even things like filling up the car with petrol. So many things can expose us to toxins. So we just have to assume that every day we're being exposed. So what are the signs of insulin resistant? How do you know if you're insulin resistant? Well, a really easy one that you could do at home right now is look at your waist measurement. We do know that if you have a waist, and let's measure it at the navel. If we have a waist measurement 100 centimeters or greater, then there is 100% of the population will have a degree of insulin resistance if their waist measurement, whether you're female or male, if your waist measurement is above 100 centimeters, then there will be a degree of insulin resistance. We know that for sure. The other measure you can look at is your waist measurement in relation to your height. So your waist measurement should be no more than half of your height. So if you are 160 centimeters tall, your waist should be no more than 80 centimeters. And if it is, you've probably got a degree of insulin resistance. So they're the easy ways to measure insulin resistance at home. Of course, as I mentioned before, there are blood and breath tests that we can do to look at insulin resistance more clinically. So what can we do about this? Because we're looking at insulin resistance as a cause of PCOS, and if you have PCOS, you have a degree of insulin resistance. So regardless of whether we're looking at prevention or we're looking at management of PCOS, this is relevant. So what would be our plan? Firstly, we know sugar, massive problem when it comes to insulin resistance and when it comes to PCOS. We know that sugar is highly addictive. And so because of this, if you're wanting to get off sugar, the best advice I can give you is to go cold turkey. Right? You're probably just horrified. But what I would recommend is that you make a plan. You say, okay, from whatever date it is, maybe it's this weekend, after, from Sunday night or Monday morning onwards, I am sugar-free. And what that means is you need to do a big cull in your pantry, your fridge, your freezer. You need to look at what events do I have on, how can I plan if we've got, a girls' weekend away, if you've got a dinner, a birthday, and other events, how are you going to manage that? And if it's your own birthday, and I've had my birthday in the past week, maybe wait until after that before you start on your sugar free journey, because you do need at least 4 weeks clear to break this habit. And then once you've broken this habit, and I'm talking no sugar. When we're talking about no sugar, we're not talking necessarily about natural sugar found in fruit and things like that. I'm talking about refined white sugar. I'm talking about adding it to your tea or your coffee. I'm talking about if you're using alternative milks, there's often sugar in that, so check your labels. If you are having like cakes, biscuits, etc., of course they're going to have sugar in them. Ice cream, huge amount of sugar in ice cream. So check out all of the things that you would think has sugar in it, and then look at labels and things, any kind of packaged food you've got in your house, because sugar is used in a lot of these items, even things that you would think would not have it, because we love it and we're addicted to it. So food companies put it in their packaged foods so that you love it and so that you buy more of it. That is it. That is the only reason. Proving taste, getting you addicted. Even savory food. If you looked at the amount of sugar in some of those takeaway burgers, in some of the, even if you look at some of those salad companies, I don't want to mention brands, but if you go into a food court, when you go off sugar, and I think I've probably said this on the pod before, when I went off sugar for the first time, when I walked through the food court, I could smell the sugar, even though it was savory food places I was walking past. And even like those, what, in inverted commas, healthy salad places, often in the sauces, the dressings and things they're using, they're loaded with sugar. That's why they taste so good. And that's because they want you to come back and buy more. So one of the best things to do when you're going off sugar is try to do food from home as much as possible. Take your lunch to work rather than buying it at the food court or at the local cafe, so that you can get off sugar. You can control exactly what's in your food. So yeah, again, actually look at commercial salad. If you're using salad dressings, just stop doing that. Use olive oil and balsamic vinegar or apple cider vinegar. Yum. Like, I'm addicted to balsamic vinegar. It's part, every person that goes on my Glow protocol gets balsamic vinegar, and it is delish. Now, obviously, there are some balsamic vinegars that are high in sugar, so you do need to look at your label again for that. So number one, I've spent a lot of time talking about this, but yeah, going cold turkey on sugar is a massive, probably the most important part of this plan to manage insulin resistance, is to get off sugar. The next one is movement, bringing some movement into your day that you enjoy doing. So it's not a chore. You look forward to it. It makes you feel good. And that can be as simple as brisk walking. That cannot be underestimated. So walking to a pace where you can just hold a conversation, that is, it's your fat burning zone, but it really helps you to burn off glucose and therefore insulin. So brisk walking is fantastic. Things like, I'm always going to talk about reformer Pilates because I'm obsessed. So if you can afford it, because it can be expensive. I'm very lucky I managed to get it on a membership that was at an incredibly low rate. So my reformer is very, very well priced. Lifting weights is also, it's incredibly good for women 40 plus because of how good it is for our bones. Because as we drop our estrogen away in perimenopause, that's when our bones can get at risk and osteoporosis can be an issue. So weight-bearing exercises and resistance training are fabulous for our bone health and also for maintaining our muscle mass. And look, again, I'm so aware of the cost of living that we're all dealing with at the moment. So if a gym membership is just not in your budget, you don't need a gym membership, okay? You can do a plank at home. That counts. You can do squats at home, even if it's just body weight, or if you've got a heavy box or something like that you can use, you could lift safely, obviously. So do body weight squats first to build up some muscle if you haven't been doing very much, and maybe go on YouTube and look at some videos of how to lift correctly, so that you're not injuring yourself, because that's super important. Knowing which muscles to turn on, that's really important. Having to do that actively. Things like lunges, you can do that. So any of those kind of exercises, push-ups, these are body weight exercises that are free. You can do at home, and they're going to really help with your insulin resistance. They're going to help with your bone health. They're going to help with your muscle mass. They're awesome. So please don't feel like, oh, I can't afford to do any of this. You totally can. There's so many things you can do. Walking around your neighborhood, free. Doing all of those little exercises I just mentioned, free. A lot of even those movement apps have 30-day free trials. So why don't you do a 30-day free trial or a 1-week free trial and get a whole bunch of ideas, make notes of the type of activities you can do at home that aren't going to cost you a fortune. Number 3 is getting enough protein. Getting enough protein. Now, the general nutrition rules around protein is that at every meal, you're having a piece of protein, and this is really more when it's animal-based protein than plant-based protein, but you look at the palm of your hand for your body, and you look at the thickness of the palm of your hand and the size of the palm of your hand, that's about the portion of protein you should be having at every meal. Okay. So having good quality protein, and that, if it's plant-based protein, it's going to depend on the protein as to how much. So have a look on the nutrition label and have a look at how much protein is in your protein food. If it's a vegetarian protein and it's chickpeas or it's lentils or it's kidney beans, look on the label of the tin if you're using a tin. Otherwise, it's easily just Google it and say how much, in 100 grams of dried chickpeas, how much protein is there? And if you're looking at how much protein should you have in a day, nature is amazing. Basically, 1 gram of protein per kilo of body weight is a standard. So if you weigh 70 kilos, you're wanting 70 grams of protein a day. And if you're wanting to put on muscle, maybe you go a little bit higher than that. But if you have medical conditions, for example, like kidney conditions, you may need to restrict protein. So again, this is not specific medical advice or health advice. This is general, assuming you have no other issues going on in your body, okay? I just want to make that clear. So protein's really important. Having breaks between your meals. If you're a current client of mine, if you've done my GLOW protocol or metabolic balance, you know the rules, right? It's 3 meals a day, no snacks. 3 meals a day, no snacks. And that is really all about balancing insulin and glucose, puts you into fat burning mode. It's super important. Get rid of your snacks, people. Man, I used to be a massive snacker before I did all of this training. And I thought, there's no way I can get rid of my snacks. I'm going to be so hungry. But no. You don't need it. The more snacking you do, the more hungry you're going to get, the more calories you're going to intake, and the more labile your insulin and glucose levels are going to be. You're going to get that afternoon slump, like so many things. So having your breaks between meals, 5 to 6 hours between meals is ideal. No snacking. So if you're getting hungry in between that, make sure you're drinking enough water. Again, the calculation, 35 mils per kilogram of body weight. Make sure you're getting enough water. And if you're still getting hungry, you just need to make sure you're having enough food at each of your 3 meals. Again, if you do a personalized plan in the GLOW protocol or metabolic balance, you'll get told exactly how many grams of protein, how many grams of veggies and salads to have. So there are very specific, not only grams and portion sizes for each person, but also that ratio of protein and veggies and salads, or protein, carbs, fats, etc. I find are very different for different people when I run these plans for the GLOW protocol. So I can't give you a general advice on that because I work with personalized nutrition and I have never seen anything better than that. So I'm hesitant these days to go for more of those generalized nutrition guidelines because the personalized protein is just so powerful. Supplementation wise, I would say your number one is magnesium. As I mentioned before, so many of us are deficient in magnesium. It's virtually impossible to overdose on magnesium. If you have too much magnesium, you'll get diarrhea. So if you start a magnesium supplement and you get diarrhea, make sure there's a couple of things. Make sure it's the right magnesium supplement. I have talked about this in the podcast. So again, if you go into the search bar and just hit magnesium, you'll find something in the Ageless and Awesome podcast. think actually I did it as a Q&A. Someone asked me a question about it. So yeah, there are some magnesiums that specifically will give you diarrhea that we use for laxatives. So you want to make sure the magnesium you're taking is not a magnesium heavy oxide. And yeah, if we tend to find people that are magnesium deficient, often they're the people that are going to get the diarrhea. So please don't get turned off magnesium if you do get diarrhea. Just stop taking it until you are normal again, and then maybe start with half the dose and work your way up. But magnesium is very important for blood sugar metabolism. So if you're magnesium deficient, it may make you a little bit more at risk of insulin resistance. Okay, there are a number of other supplements that you can take, like chromium is one of them. It's a mineral. It's also really important for blood sugar metabolism. There are other supplements I would prefer not to say because, I think you need some advice from a professional if you're going to go down the supplement route. But magnesium, almost everybody needs it. So I'm pretty happy to recommend that one for most people, unless you've been told not to have it, of course. What else was I going to mention there? There was something else that just came into my mind, but it has gone, but that's fine. So yeah, so there are a number of supplements you can take. Oh, I remember what it was now. I'll say that in a sec. There are a number of supplements you can take that can really help you manage your blood sugar and reduce sugar cravings. And the other thing I was going to mention is adding cinnamon to all of your food. Adding cinnamon to all of your food, that it makes sense. Obviously, if you're having oats, if you're having curries, things like that, cinnamon is a really good insulin sensitizer. So it helps make the body more responsive to insulin and reverses that insulin resistance. Another thing I just will mention actually is a little bit about food order. And that is if you're having your protein first, or even just a few bites of protein first, that will really help with managing insulin and glucose levels. So just a couple of bites of protein first helps a lot. So if you can start getting into that habit, that is a really great way to manage insulin resistance. So I hope this has been helpful. If you suspect that PCOS might be something that's impacting you, then please go and talk to your healthcare professional. And, try not to spend too much time just Googling it because there are a lot of rabbit holes. And to be honest, there's a lot we're still learning about PCOS. There is some new, I think it was in August, I cannot remember of the body now. It was like an International Endocrine Society, something like that, had a conference and talked about PCOS and actually reclassifying it and renaming it because of the insulin resistant component. And the fact that it really is a metabolic condition more so than a reproductive organ condition. So there's a lot of change going on in the space with regard to PCOS. So that's why I'm encouraging you not to Google too much, because what you're seeing on the internet may be old information. Okay. If you have any questions, please feel free to send them in. I'd love to do a Q&A this week on PCOS. So if you do have a question on it specifically, send it in and I will address it on Thursday. So yeah, that can be DM'd on @SusieGardenWellness, or if you're on Spotify, you can message me directly through the app. Have an awesome week. It's a short week if you're in the majority of Australia. We've had a public holiday on Monday. And yeah, I will see you on Thursday. Thanks so much for joining me today on the Ageless and Awesome podcast. If you liked today's episode, please make sure you click the little plus button if you're on Apple Podcasts, or the follow button if you're on Spotify, so that you can get each new episode delivered to you every single week. If you like free stuff, and who doesn't, then head over to susiegarden.com and grab my 8 essential age-defying secrets every woman over 40 should know right now. Or if you'd like to continue the discussion, head over to Instagram and DM me @SusieGardenWellness. I'd love to connect with you.